All right, people, we are back with another podcast episode, a little bit more of a low-key one this week. There wasn't a whole lot to talk about, but we had the return of the fourth and final season of a show that has been one of our favorites, one of the more interesting shows to watch the last couple of years, and probably one of the more interesting shows as well, just to come out in general, as far as like kind of breaking down the barriers as far as what defines a show. I'm back with my good friend Josh Markland, who helped me break down that crazy Euphoria finale. Josh, how you been?
I'm great, Dom. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to have you back on the show, man. You're very excited to talk about some Atlanta.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the show.
Yeah, it's a good show. It's really good. All right. We're going to break this down, all of that and more on today's episode of the Talkin TV podcast. All right, Josh, you're back on the show after a couple months ago when we talked about the Euphoria finale. Oh, man, I don't know. Real quick before we get into this, like, are you still, like, having any lingering thoughts about that Euphoria finale or not? You're mostly just like, I don't really care. Just bring on whatever season 3 is going to do.
I haven't thought about it since the moment it ended, if I'm being completely honest. That show has, like, no lasting impact on me. It's pretty superficial.
Funny how that works, right? It's like people are so into certain shows at the moment that they're like, I completely forgotten about it. I guess that just shows how superficial that show is.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely. But yeah, we're here to talk about Atlanta, though, which is a show that I feel like is in a strange way kind of changed a lot as far as how its reputation goes and how it's been perceived over the last couple of years, where Atlanta is a show that kind of when it started, I feel like nobody really knew what to expect, which usually can sometimes be the marker of like a really, really great and interesting show. You know, it's a kind of a thing of where it's like, you know, people talk all the time about how they want stuff different, but then usually when different stuff comes out, they're like, oh man, I don't like that because it didn't remind me of this other thing that I like, you know? And the one thing that can be said about Atlanta, despite everyone's kind of thoughts on it and how that's maybe changed over the years, is that Atlanta, I think we can safely both say, is truly unlike anything else that is on TV, that has been on TV before in the past, that has been on TV in the future. You know, there's been some interesting, really thought-provoking stuff that this show has done. There's been some stuff that I've been like, I don't necessarily know if that's as smart as people think that it is. But yeah, so obviously, like I said, the show all revolves around somebody who I feel like a couple of years ago was like, seemed to be like the next person to like rule over Hollywood. And now I feel like that's kind of changed a little bit. That, of course, being Donald Glover, aka Childish Gambino, aka whatever other crazy nicknames that he's had. Obviously, you know, we both have kind of grown up with him, you know, started out as a writer on 30 Rock, then transitioned to a starring role in Community, where he kind of established his modus operandi there. I don't know, like, what was your first like real kind of experience with like realizing who Donald Glover was as a personality?
Well, Donald Glover I first learned about him from a stand-up show. I think it was called Weirdo. That was like the funniest I've ever seen when I first saw it. And then I found out he made music. I found out he was Childish Gambino, and you know, because of the internet, all that stuff. And then I found out about Community, and then I kind of worked backwards, honestly. Right. I got big into Community, but it was mostly the stand-up stuff. I realized like, oh, this guy is fucking funny. Like, he's gonna be like the next big thing, you know? And then like you got deeper into it, and you're like, this guy's like the most creative person out right now. He's writing, he's making music, he's funny. Like, what can he do right now, you know?
Yeah, like, and that kind of that kind of led to the whole thing of it. You know, he was even doing the bits on SNL where it's like, oh, I'm such a genius, I can do anything and all that. And like, I feel like there was kind of like this interesting thing because I feel like the biggest thing was in high school, right? It's almost like kind of the Childish Gambino fans were like an underground cult, but I feel like it took a while for people to realize it. Like, oh, Childish Gambino and Donald Glover are one and the same, because on the one hand, right, you had the Childish Gambino fans, and then on the other hand, you had like the Donald Glover Community fans. They were all the guys that were like fan casting him back when like we were in high school, because you and I are like around the same age. So we were in high school around the same time and all that was going down. You know, this was like, I think like right when the Sony hack happened, and you know, it was pre the whole discussion to merge Spider-Man into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so that everyone was like, oh, they should reboot Spider-Man with Miles Morales, and it should be Donald Glover playing him. And that's kind of like when all that decision making started, right? And so naturally, I feel like obviously, you know, I feel like kind of where this all transitions is obviously, you know, I feel like it kind of, there's this merging point around like 2014, 2015, when he makes the decision to leave Community after only 5 episodes into the 5th season in order to pursue more of his music career. And then about a year after Community ends in 2015, after NBC axed it, Yahoo picked it up for the final season and then axed it again. What's it called? You have the announcement that FX is going to be doing the show Atlanta. Glover's going to be starring in it along with executive producing it, directing and writing several episodes. And what's it called? And while the outlook of the show itself seems pretty standard and, kind of palatable for a mass audience where it's like, okay, he's a Princeton dropout. He's trying to manage his cousin's up and coming rap career in Atlanta. And along the way, they're just going to get into some crazy misadventures, typical TV setup. It's got a pretty fresh and interesting cast. Brian Tyree Henry and Lakeith Stanfield and Zazie Beetz, who were all at the time unknowns. Lakeith Stanfield had popped up in a couple things, like he'd already done Short Term 12 and had been in Straight Outta Compton as Snoop Dogg the previous year. But for the most part, previously all unknowns. And little did we know that was really just going to be just kind of like the entryway into what this show really was, which I feel like I believe the term that he used in order to describe the show is Afro-surrealism, where he's essentially creating almost like this surrealist world, almost like as a way in order to like kind of translate across what's it called, like different race relations and how they go, but like in a really weird and interesting and funny way. It's like almost like the first thing where it's like essentially trying to craft an exercise in African-American relations within like kind of the history of this country, but in like a funny way, if that makes any sense. I don't know. How do you think I did with describing that?
I'd say more of like an accessible way. Like I feel like he set like a mission to make it seem like make it felt that what African Americans go through in this country is not too dissimilar from what other people go through, but like it'll never be truly understood in the mainstream. So like even with like the one-off episodes, like with the one where in the beginning there was the boat, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's completely wonky. You don't really know what's going on, but he always knows how it ties back together. At the end, you're like, wow, that was like life-changing. Like I didn't even, like as a black man, I didn't even know I felt that way until like I saw that, and I've never felt any way more represented,
Yeah, it's really interesting kind of how he was able to always tie them about. It's almost like one of the first things where it's like you almost don't even realize he's talking about race until at the end, and he managed to tie it. At least previously, I thought he managed to always tie that down in like a really, really rich and interesting way. And like I thought previously, it was always funny. Like I always cited this, that the BAN episode from season 1 is one of the single greatest episodes of television I've ever seen. Just kind of like the way they were using that in order to like comment on like kind of the inherent ridiculous factor that goes into just how harshly the media clamps down on and criticizes rap, and then how they somehow managed to transfer that onto like what's it called, on transphobic relations that ends up kind of being like translating into trans race and making it funny. It's one of the most ingenious things that I've ever seen. As far as kind of how the show was initially conceived, some interesting things about this. This is apparently the first show with an all-black writing staff, which is apparently virtually unheard of in the history of American television. And during an interview with the New Yorker, when he was talking about it initially, Glover stated that the reason for why the characters smoke weed is because they all have PTSD, since every black person does in America. And I wanted to kind of start there as far as what kind of makes this show so different than anything on TV, because I feel like, looking in, obviously, right, the show's got a half-hour structure, right? So naturally, one would assume that it would prefer like the typical sitcom route, but I feel like almost immediately the show did something really different. As far as I would argue that this is really the first show that kind of took the idea of the half-hour format and turned that into like, okay, this doesn't necessarily have to be a drama or a comedy per se, And I feel like this was one of the first shows that really took that and was like, okay, we could just tell like whatever kind of story we want, like we kind of have this metric, we have this theme that we're going for like throughout every episode. And so that kind of gives them the opportunity to not really have this show feel like another one of those shows where you're kind of just, hanging out with, your favorite characters on a week by week basis as they go on like kind of their different crazy and wacky misadventures. It kind of contributes more into like kind of what I like to call the medium of TV, in the sense of where you're watching each individual story in order to kind of build it into this one kind of greater and greater piece of art. I don't know, like kind of what's just your overall general take on kind of like what Atlanta is that kind of makes it so different than anything else on TV?
Well, I think it really goes to show that FX really just gave Donald Glover the freedom to tell his own story, and his relationship with the director it's Hiro Murai.
Hiro Murai, yeah, who's also gone on to direct a lot of other just awesome stuff.
Yeah. Just like the relationship they have is clearly special, because like as soon as the show came on, you could tell it was different from everything else. It was cinematic, it was a little deeper than like other shows a little bit, and it just shows that he had a story that he wanted to tell, and he knew how he wanted to tell it. And he's done a great job so far telling it, And I did some research too. He's not even from Atlanta, Not anyone in the cast is even from Atlanta. So like just the way that he's been able to represent what being from Atlanta is like without even being from there is amazing,
Right. And that's obviously, again, such a big part of the show is the fact that it's like, again, they talk all the time. It's like, Sopranos could not have worked if it wasn't in Jersey. Breaking Bad could not have worked if it wasn't set in Albuquerque. And I feel like this is another one of those shows where it's like, again, location is so important to this show, where, again, even though it's kind of making these grander statements on kind of the status of African Americans in the whole country, again, we see like a lot of different instances of what's it called, different periods that have involved them. Obviously, commenting on the Black Lives Matter movement of the last couple of years, obviously on the George Floyd things. This most recent season that just premiered started up literally with there's just a riot going on everywhere, and just people are looting stuff, like very obviously, trying to allude back to the COVID riots and everything. It's like the show always has like a really, really awesome presence of setting and just knows exactly what kind of tone it is going for, which I think is really hard because this show is balancing out like a lot of different tones at all times. Like 1 minute it's funny, 1 minute it's tragic, 1 minute it's surreal. You don't really know how to feel. In a lot of moments, I feel like half the time we're just watching Donald Glover's character Earn just wander around and just like not really know what to expect, because he's like, I want to feel like this is a like this is an underplayed racist thing against me, but I can't really tell because it's just so bizarre. Like the thing that I always go back to as far as like when I can tell that this show was going to be like different is I want to say it's like the 4th episode of the 1st season. And where they're like, oh man, Al's gonna play in a basketball tournament against Justin Bieber, but it's just like a random black kid, like not Justin Bieber, but it's like, no, that's Justin Bieber in this case, and they're just like, everyone's going along with it like it's completely normal, but like we as the audience know that that's obviously not Justin Bieber. And then like the shit with the invisible car and just all of the different like crazy shit that goes into it, like I don't know, I feel like there's been some criticism as far as like he's kind of a little bit too full of himself when it comes to kind of like the surrealist elements, but I don't know, I feel like those elements have always been the ones that work the most for me, and those have always been the elements that again just help this show stand out above the rest. Like I don't know if you've seen any David Lynch movies, but obviously he's the kind of the go-to when it comes to like surrealist filmmaking that feels like it's in a dream, filmmaking that feels like that you're watching characters who are kind of aware that they're not in a conscious state of mind, for lack of a better word. But I don't know, like kind of what's just your thoughts in general on the surrealism and more trippy natures of the show?
Well, I think it stands out because he interplays the surrealism with like modern topics. Like you said, the Justin Bieber thing. Like he knows how to interplay this like a surrealist moment with like something that's going on right now. Like even with when Darius is stealing the air fryer, or he was
we're trying to return the air fryer.
He was trying to return the air fryer, and the lady was chasing him around, and he was like, I don't know what you're hearing from Fox News. I'm not Antifa, like. She's chasing him around. It felt insidious, He was all the way down the alley, and like she was slowly coming down the alley.
Like they shot that like it was a horror movie where you just see it from the wide and you just hear the fucking chair coming around the corner. Like they always do that so well. And like I understand like obviously how that's meant to like be scary. It's the idea that's like, oh man, black people, they're always looking over their shoulder. They never know where it's gonna come from. But I just thought the way they framed that just like kind of made it funny for that's the stuff that like is always consistently getting me back into this show. Now, so here's my next question, kind of my next point is that so Glover, I feel like he's handling some very, very obviously, serious weighty issues, but he's doing it in almost like kind of like a loose way. He's like, yeah, this is just stuff that we like kind of have to go through, as obviously the black people have to go through in this country, almost like it's almost kind of like it's evolved to a point where it's like, yeah, kind of this is never going to change. And it's always just kind of like a thing that we just have to deal with, like, I don't know, like, I feel like constantly the thing that critics are constantly trying to figure out with the show is like whether or not the show's intention is to kind of try and create some sort of message or anything, or kind of just present the scenarios as they are and kind of allow people to draw their own conclusions from it. I don't know. What's kind of your take on that?
I don't think he has a specific message in the show. I don't think he ever really goes into it with like, I'm trying to make people feel a certain way. I think he's trying to show what it's like to be black in America. I think that I don't know how to put it. Like it's even tough for me to explain it. Like he just knows how to represent to make me feel represented in a show.
Right.
Like I watch the show and I feel like this is what I go through every day. Like
right.
someone's always watching me. I'm always being watched.
Right.
I feel like when he was telling the story to the therapist about Princeton and how he said he felt like a gorilla at Princeton.
Right.
And like sexually, he felt like they were using language that was faces of a rapist, like
right.
No, I feel like he does an amazing job at it.
Right. And like kind of the whole thing of where it's, you think about all the different interactions that Ern as a character and like all the other characters, like it kind of really started off exclusively with Ern, and then it grew out like once they gave more solo episodes to some of the supporting characters, like Al and Darius and all that, and kind of like all the different scenarios that they go through, where each different scenario that they're kind of placed with, I feel like a lot of examples are a couple big ones from season 2, obviously entitled Robin season, the barbershop and then Woods episodes for Al, and then obviously one of the most infamous episodes of the entire show, the Teddy Perkins episode for Darius, which is like just again one of the most, it's like insane, like, oh my god, how are they doing this on a show, and how is it able to incorporate like all of these different things and make all of these different statements, where it's like they're making a statements on like Michael Jackson, all the disturbing things that like he went through, kind of the idea of what celebrity does to them, and while also kind of very clearly being an homage to Get Out, because Get Out happened like a year earlier, and it's like, oh, okay, I see you, Donald Glover, I know what you're trying to do here. We understand that like you're also paying attention to other like very prominent Black artists that are coming on their way up. But I think that kind of the most interesting thing and kind of how that ties into the 4th season. So kind of in order, if you follow the track record, season 1 is kind of, more so, again, if we're talking about like kind of more of the traditional elements of the show, the traditional story points of the show, not talking about the surrealist elements. Season 1 is kind of, they're starting to break through, Ern officially starts working for Al, and by the end of the season, they're at a point where it's like, okay, they're really going to start making some money. Season 2, they're still kind of on the up and up, they're kind of a little bit of a trial and error to see if this thing is actually going to work, and then by the end, there's touring in Europe. And so then we obviously had a 4-year gap in between seasons 2 and 3, obviously, again, because of just Glover's busy schedule and then the COVID delays and everything. But so what's so interesting about 2022, like I said, I've been talking about this since the beginning of the year, where all of the shows that were kind of held over from COVID, we kind of got back this year. And what was so interesting about that is we ended up getting not only 1, but 2 seasons of Atlanta. Again, we got Succession back in the fall, Ozark, Better Call Saul, Barry, The Boys, a bunch of different shows that we didn't end up getting in the last couple of years because of COVID. And so Atlanta is kind of the end of that tenure, because Atlanta shot its 3rd and 4th seasons both simultaneously and then debuted them both this year. And we talked earlier kind of about the 3rd season and kind of how it ended up kind of almost being a little bit problematic, because between obviously the COVID delays, they were shooting in Europe, the actual Atlanta storyline with like our characters ended up only kind of being half of that season. And the rest of the season, while I thought gave some really interesting and thought-provoking episodes, ended up just being essentially a series of like Donald Glover's Black Mirror, where every kind of other episode is like this almost short story parable that kind of is a greater extension of the themes that he's going for, and then ends on one of the weirdest finales ever. Every season he's always got to give, Zazie Beetz' character Van her own solo episode. And those episodes for me have always been the weakest episodes, like for each season. And I think that this past season finale kind of took the cake as far as just being a really strange, what the fuck, bizarro, just surrealist to the point where it doesn't even make sense from a story standpoint. Like all the stuff that Van goes through, all the stuff that Van does in that finale. And then at the end, we're kind of just expected to just go along with it and be like, oh yeah, she was just having a hard time, And it's like, she's baking hands. She's killing people with bread. She's a drug runner. She's got a French Amelie accent. She's hooking up with Alexander Skarsgård. Like, I'm still trying to process that finale. That's still one of the just dumbest episodes I've ever seen that just makes no sense. But what I thought was interesting about kind of the premiere of season 4, the final season, is we're finding our characters now almost in the state of where they're kind of almost past the success phase. They're past like, okay, we did it, we made it, all that. And now we're kind of in almost like this wind down phase where we're almost kind of having to like grapple with the choices that we've made, understand kind of what it is that brought us to this point. And I think so far, at least for my money, I think that like they've nailed it. They've, job well done, between these first 2 episodes, with, obviously, Al kind of going through the scavenger hunt, Darius being chased by the woman with the air, because of the air fryer and all that. And then kind of the weirdo, bizarro moment with Ern and Van, where they're what is that? They're going to like some mall, but they end up running into a bunch of their exes. Yeah. I don't really know. I'm assuming that was supposed to be a thing of where it's like, oh, they've gone off and grown and changed, but everybody that's has kind of been like stuck here in this weird time loop. I mean, I have to assume that's what they were going for there.
I saw a tagline for this season that was like, did they change or did Atlanta change? And I had a question for you. You said that season 2 was named Robin season.
Yeah, that was the subtitle for it. Yeah.
Did season 1 and 3, did they have taglines?
No, season 2 was the only one.
Okay, yeah, because season 4, if this is the tagline, like, did they change or did Atlanta change? They've done a perfect intro to how that's gonna play into the season, Because if season 3 when they're in Europe shows how they're developing, they're coming full circle into their own characters. Then season 4 is going to be like, okay, now they're back in Atlanta, and how their character development, how's that gonna work in Atlanta? A completely different setting. It's very confined.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Because again, and I feel like a lot of the things in the promos and the trailers kind of leading up to this season is a lot of, Earn wants to move. Earn, obviously, he talked about in this last episode that he's planning on moving out of Atlanta. He's planning on taking a job offer in LA. And it's almost like kind of like, not wanting to let the city trap them, obviously, because they grew up there. There's this connection that you form. And I think this goes without saying, regardless of race, but there's this connection that you always form with the place that you grew up. You can move as many places as you want, but you're always going to have like kind of those roots there, And I almost feel like Earn is trying to outrace those because he feels like he doesn't want to get trapped there. He's finally come to a place where he's comfortable. He feels like he's not a failure anymore, but he feels like part of that is still kind of, constrained in the city where he lives, in the city where he grew up, and and the thing that I think was also really interesting about these first 2 episodes is it becomes abundantly clear that Earn is carrying around like a lot of still resentment and self-doubt that may have been kind of, dictating a lot of his previous actions and may have caused him to, see certain things differently. I think probably what was even more interesting about the second episode, the therapy episode, or the Homely's Little Horse, is how Earn essentially now uses all of his money to essentially create and completely fabricate the scenario to essentially ruin and humiliate this one random woman's life, simply because she gave him a hard time at the airport and he believed that it was for racist reasons, And now what was interesting about that is in previous instances in the show, we would have immediately been like, okay, we're only seeing this from Earn's perspective, so naturally we're seeing this as just being like weird and off-putting, as one would assume. But what's interesting is this is the first instance where we're told about it, we're not directly shown it. And so as a result, once we actually kind of see the after effects of it, we can kind of draw our own conclusions as far as, okay, is Earn justified in this, or is Earn just like kind of carrying out some petty revenge just because he's in a position where he can't, And it's almost like it's like for the first time, like it's Donald Glover like actually casting Earn in something other than like kind of the plucky, underdog protagonist than what we've seen before. It was really interesting, I thought, and really quite different, I feel like, than a lot of other things we've gotten from a show that is all about doing things differently and not based off the book,
Yeah, but even towards the end of the episode where Darius says, like, I don't know if this is extreme pettiness or like terrorism, and Earn's like,
great line, by the way.
I can be both. Like, it was some sick shit what he did. Like, yeah, she might have like hurt him, and maybe it was racially motivated. I think to an extent it was, because at the beginning of the episode you see her like kind of like fawning after her black neighbor, which is kind of weird. So it shows that she has a weird relationship with African Americans. So clearly that's supposed to carry on throughout the episode.
Oh, yeah.
Like even towards the end, like he's just sitting at the bar reflecting, like, man, was what I did right? Like it's nice to see that even though he did some sick shit, that he's reflecting on it, and the therapy is helping, I guess, a little bit,
Again, I'd argue it's the first time that we've ever seen Earn actually do that, where, again, so much of Earn's arc throughout the show has almost been just kind of reacting off of this very strange, surrealist world that they're in. But now he's, like, actually starting to reflect off of his decisions and, like, again, show some growth and show, like, yeah, is this like really right? Is this, maybe the world isn't out to get me. Maybe it's just me doing this stuff. But I like that point that you brought up as well about kind of the idea of like, us setting us up with the white woman that he eventually humiliates. And again, having this strange relationship with her black neighbor, obviously that goes into the whole idea of it's like, perhaps some racism specifically from white women comes from the idea of, again, them fetishizing black men and the idea that it's like, okay, they're placing them on this pedestal as well. Again, it goes into the whole thing of it's like, everybody that bullies gay people when they're younger are secretly gay themselves. It's like that goes into that whole like psychological warfare of like you're always projecting out against the things that you actually like might like yourself. It's like it goes against the whole thing about bullying. It's like bullies are only ever just projecting their own self-hatred onto others, which is why they're bullies. And I feel that kind of goes into that as well. And I feel like, again, that kind of goes across the board for all the characters. I feel that's something that I feel like that kind of is the theme that we're going to be following for the rest of the season. So, like, for example, if last season was all about kind of how the characters were just dealing with, different kinds of the whole thing about last season was these characters were in kind of an alien environment. They're in Europe. They're in a completely new setting. They don't really know kind of what to expect. And along the way, they're going to kind of almost, have these different encounters with these different groups of people that kind of change their perspective on things, where it's like, again, like the fact that every other episode is this kind of, self-contained anthological thing. This season, again, I think is definitely setting up for, again, the characters just kind of realizing and coming full circle and understanding like kind of the impact that they've had. You know, I particularly can't wait to see what Al and Darius did. I think that also obviously the Al moment from the first episode as well, where he's kind of, you know, the one rapper that he followed that had a big impact on him. What was his name? Blue Blood, something like that.
I can't get away from this without talking about that. That was like a tribute to MF Doom. And they had Earl Sweatshirt as like a fill-in, making like it was Blue Blood, I think.
Right.
He was doing all the verses. That was fucking amazing. That was like one of the best things I've ever seen. Like as soon as Darius got to the car, he's like, "Damn, Blue Blood died," and he started talking about Blue Blood. I was like, this kind of sounds like MF Doom, like a mysterious underground rapper who's like not really known, and then he just mysteriously died. And they said like he died 3 months ago, like his agent just released it. Like it was amazing how they did that, and like really beautiful they did that for MF Doom.
Yeah, I was really interesting. And again, like, I wish we could say that was the first one, but there was another one that just died the other day, whose name I'm totally forgetting. The one who, like, he got shot, like, when walking into a store. Yeah, him. But, you know, that was another one that just died. And obviously they had the reference to Tupac last season in the, you know, in the one episode where they were in Amsterdam. And so, like, again, they're very, very, very still clearly alluding to and referencing real life events as well and all that. And again, kind of showing how that, like, kind of reflects on our characters. It shows where it's like, yeah, this is where they've come from. This is kind of, you know, and in particular, I think that the character of Al, who I think has slowly grown and almost surpassed Ern as like being the most interesting character on the show. You know, Darius has always kind of been like the fun supporting character, but Al, I think, is, again, Al, who is somebody who kind of, I don't even know really, like, I don't feel like I can't come up with the words in order to describe kind of Al's role and kind of the character type that he had in season 1. But season 2, I feel like we really got to know Al a lot more as a person, you know, understand where he was coming from. And I think season 3, Loki had one of Al's best moments where he's kind of like, his whole thing is like, yeah, he's arguably got more skin in the game than Ern does, because even though Ern is doing this in order to, again, just, you know, kind of make a situation better for himself and his daughter, and, you know, his daughter Lottie, and obviously for Van, Al's also kind of got way more of a stake in the game, because this is the thing that he cares about. You know, this is his source of passion. Like the moment in last season where he's talking to the one kid where they're not sure if he took his phone or not, and the kid's just fucking with them the entire time. And what's it called? And Al basically kind of breaks down, like, you know, the idea of what kind of motivates him to create rap, obviously, and how I just think that, again, Brian Tyree Henry is just one of the most underrated actors and talents that we have. And I think that the fact that the show gave him like such an avenue and a route is just hilarious. How he's consistently able to, you know, balance out between like being super tough and being super vulnerable. Like, I still think that one of the funniest moments in the second episode is when Ern's on his way to therapy and Al calls him and he's like trying to get his password to his AOL account or something like that. And he's like, what's your favorite movie? Scarface? Yeah, let me try Scarface. And he's like, wait, no, you had that email when we were in like middle school. Try Mulan. He's like, Mulan. He like laughs. He's like, oh shit, I think that worked. I thought that was just hilarious, you know?
Yeah. It's also nice that like, it's perfect that they made him a rapper, because it also plays into the fact that they're in Atlanta. And like, I feel like a big part of being a rapper is like, you're going to blow up in one city and you're going to have a fan base. And then it's up to you to decide, am I going to leave the place where I blew up and where all my fans are? And am I going to get out of the place that you could die there, you know, like as a rapper, you could die where you're from. Or am I going to go and leave my family where I'm from and try to make it big? And so far, he stayed in Atlanta and he's had some crazy ass experiences, you know, like things are not safe for him necessarily. But even when he was talking to Darius about where he's going to go, he doesn't like LA, he doesn't like New York, he's going to go to Jamaica. Like, Jamaica's different. It's maybe safer, but you can't be a rapper in Jamaica. No rappers living in Jamaica, you know?
Right. At least not ones that aren't already pre-established that just like have like a vacation home there, you know? Yeah. But no, yeah, that's an interesting point, because again, the big thing of Al's journey is how Al is just, again, kind of grappling with this, with this kind of existential depression that comes with him blowing up as a rapper that you often find a lot of artists go through, you know? And especially that's another thing as well that goes into, again, just, you know, being a black man in America, is the idea of, again, just dealing with, you know, kind of the stigmas that go along with mental health in general, how, again, just men in general are encouraged, you know, just bury their feelings, you know, be a man, all that good stuff. And that's something that Al is constantly grappling with, this idea of, you know, ultimately, I feel like Al's in a point where he's trying to figure out like what his legacy is going to be. And then he realizes he doesn't even know what he wants. He's been, again, that another thing that so many artists have to deal with is he's been so focused on just, you know, getting his art out there and getting it noticed that now he doesn't even, that now he's to the point where he has to like ask like kind of what he wants from it. And he has just not taken the time to really discern that and really figure that out. And just as well, again, you see that reflected from the other characters as well, where, again, I think as botched as it was, and I think as stupid as it was, I still kind of understood what he was trying to go for with the season 3 finale with Van, Where Van's whole thing is, again, she had a kid at a relatively young age. She's worked these variety of different jobs, and now she's trying to find herself because she realizes, again, she has essentially had no identity other than kind of just being with Ern and Lottie, yeah, she's got her friends and all that, but what ultimately at the end of the day is her identity, And in a strange way, I feel like that's what always makes it so satisfying to just watch Darius, because Darius at the end of the day is a dude that no matter how weird, how trippy stuff gets, you can just tell he's a dude that's got it figured out. And I feel like that's the reason why everyone is kind of coming to the point where they kind of having him around, because Darius is that one friend where you're what exactly you're I don't know exactly what that guy does. He may just kind of be leeching off me, but he's such a great dude to be around. He always seems to know his shit. He always seems to know what's going on. And he always seems to just again, just have some insight that all the other characters don't have that just makes it perfect, kind of the whole, and obviously, again, the gun enthusiast and the cutting out of the dog in season 1, the going to see Cat Williams in season 2 with the alligator. What's it called? And he just immediately senses bad vibes, hanging with Van in season 3 and in season 2 with the Drake episode, the Champagne Poppy episode. And then at the beginning of this episode, where again, he's just trying to return an air fryer in the middle of a loot, and the cashier's no, do you not see what's going on here? Come on, man, wake up. He's I don't know. I love Darius, man. And Lakeith is just such a talent. I'm constantly going back and forth on who my favorite character is on this show, but I feel for right now, it's still Darius, because, man.
Darius feels like the only one that's doesn't really have a motive. He doesn't have pressure, Al has the pressure of I'm a rapper. What's going to be my legacy? I have to build something with what I'm going to do. When he was talking with the fashion people, you could tell he was uncomfortable. He doesn't want this. He doesn't want to sell out and have that be a part of his legacy. Ern, he went to Princeton. He's supposed to be the smart one that made it out. He has the pressure to be successful because he's smart and, he's well liked. Van, she's as a black woman, they face the most pressure as to what their identity going to be. She doesn't want to just be seen as a mother. That's why she was doing crazy shit in Europe. She wants to have some kind of identity outside of being a mother. And there's just pressure to be something bigger. And with Darius, you don't feel that at all. He has no motive. He's just trying to live. He's trying to do some psychedelics in Amsterdam. That's why he's the perfect relief for the show,
Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more. Again, I still think that I don't know. Again, it's almost another one of those instances where just the idea of Darius has become so intertwined with Lakeith as an actor that I'm almost worried that for the rest of his career, Lakeith's gonna have a little bit of a hard time breaking away from that, because obviously, again, the brief moment that he has at the beginning of Get Out. See, it's a little bit of Darius, the role that he plays in Sorry to Bother You. He's a little bit more slightly upkept, but you still see elements of Darius in there. I feel if anything, that's kind of almost what it preemptively ruined his performances in Knives Out and Uncut Gems. The fact that it's he's just Darius, but in a different setting. Where that happens with actors a lot, where they do that one role so well that you just can't see them as anything else. Where it's it's almost impossible to separate the role of Lakeith from Darius ultimately. And you even go back and see it in some of his roles prior to Atlanta, and you even say, oh man, I'm just starting to see a little bit of Darius in there too,
Wasn't he in Judas and the Black Messiah though? I never saw it, but
yes, he was. Yes, he was. So I'm actually glad that you brought that up. Yeah, I feel that's the first role that he's had post Atlanta that where he's actually given a compelling performance. But what's interesting about that performance as well is that he's essentially kind of grappling with this idea that he's essentially kind of the reason why or kind of is one of the many reasons that kind of led to kind of the destabilization of kind of the end of the civil rights movement. Because what's so interesting about that movie is you see that movie, that's at the end of the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King's been assassinated, Malcolm X has been assassinated, things are starting to wind down. It's right before Reagan is elected, so you're just starting to see, crack started to get leaked into African-American communities and all that. And Fred Hampton is trying to lead kind of what's left of the Black Panther Party. And so, so Lakeith's kind of arc that he has to deal with in that movie is understanding that even though he is making situations better for himself, he is ultimately kind of leading to the destruction of any semblance of kind of, footing that his people have. And that's kind of what makes that role and that performance in that movie so interesting and compelling, definitely, and kind of, again, how he's almost able to use that Dariusness of himself to as a facade against it, and I think that one of the best moments of the movie is when he's giving an interview at the end and he's talking about kind of how he thought that he's trying to essentially justify his actions. And you can tell that he knows that he's full of shit as well. And I think that he ended up, the real person, ended up killing himself shortly after that interview. It's really sad and tragic ultimately. And I think Lakeith is absolutely amazing. And of course the Oscars did what they always do, which is, what did they do? They justified, Lakeith and Kaluuya both have the exact same amount of screen time in the movie. They both split up the movie evenly. We're going to put them both in supporting. Because they put all their marketing behind Kaluuya because they knew he was going to win supporting. They knew he wasn't going to win lead because they were trying to get Chadwick the best actor Oscar that year. Because he just recently died. But they're like, fuck, Lakeith is so good. We have to put him in there too. So they put them both in supporting. I better not go off on another tangent about the Oscars because we'll be here for 3 hours. But essentially, yeah, just more jury rigging that the Oscars typically do. But in order to kind of bring it back to Atlanta, so a couple more things that I wanted to talk about is kind of the COVID gap as well. Because like I said, like we were talking about before, Atlanta's one of many, many shows that was affected by the COVID gap. Again, just because of Donald Glover's super busy schedule. Again, he made that Guava Island movie in between, I want to say like seasons 2 and 3, I believe. I think that came out like after season 2. Then he was being commissioned for that Mr. and Mrs. Smith show on Amazon with Phoebe Waller-Bridge. And then that ended up falling through. I don't even know what the status of that, whether that's even still happening or not. What's interesting, too, is I feel like a lot of people were expecting him to go on and make movies, and that just didn't end up happening. And then, obviously, so the plan was initially they were going to shoot 3 and 4 back-to-back and have it released in 2021, and then, obviously, COVID pushed it back, and they ended up delaying it both to 2022 as well. So we got season 3 back in the spring, and so we're getting this back again. It's been a significant amount of time since season 2, and obviously they've incorporated that into their structure as well. So I guess my question is, like, I don't know, like, do you feel like there's like any noticeable changes? Do you think like the pandemic had any effects on the show? Because I'm not seeing any, at least not yet. But I don't know, like, if you just picked up on something that I didn't.
Yeah, not really. I'm gonna be honest. This may not be related, but like in certain points, I felt like the writing was a little bit more weirder than it has been. I don't know if that's anything with COVID, but it's like a little bit blander. Like they had a random line about Publix when they were walking into the Atlantic Station. They're like, he said he blocked off his schedule to take her to Atlantic Station, but also to go to Publix. Like I feel like that maybe wouldn't have been something that was in the first couple of seasons. Like it just felt a little bit odd, but you also are the movie nerd. So what other shows were delayed because of COVID? Do you know?
Oh, a bunch. So like obviously again, Barry season 3, Better Call Saul's final season, Ozark's final season got pushed back a year. You know, obviously Succession was the big one where it's like everyone was so excited for that, and then they obviously had to delay that, but they got back to shooting right at the beginning. A couple other ones that I'm drawing up, like The Boys, obviously, because The Boys, they finished production on that on season 2 right before COVID started, and then they had the lockdowns. They put out season 2 in fall of 2020, but then obviously we didn't get any more of The Boys in 2021. So the point being is that we've gotten all of these shows back. Almost every single one of those shows have come back now, starting with Succession back in the fall. And I believe that Atlanta is the last one. You know, obviously there's still a few more small ones, like His Dark Materials, you know, once we get season 3 of The Mandalorian. But for the most part, like things are pretty much back to a regularly scheduled pattern. And what's going to be interesting is seeing kind of going forward how many more of the shows that we follow. Again, a lot of the shows are coming to an end. Better Call Saul ended. This is Atlanta's final season. Ozark ended back in the spring. There's a couple more shows that are going to end. Again, Succession and Barry are probably only get like 1 or 2 more seasons each. Stranger Things next season is going to be the last Stranger Things. That was the other big one where we hadn't gotten a season of Stranger Things since 2019, you know? Yeah. And also just because of how big and massive this most recent season was, in addition to the COVID delays and everything, you know? So, but I guess what I'm saying is that we should be getting back to like a regular kind of TV schedule, but I'm just not sure if like, as far as like kind of, you know, because one of the biggest things that we talked about with a lot of shows that came out during the pandemic is noticing like, okay, we could see a little bit of the COVID shooting in here, you know, as part of the show. Like, I feel like one of the most obvious and egregious examples of this was the most recent season of The Umbrella Academy that dropped on Netflix, where that could not have been more obvious that was a COVID shoot, where they're all in one location. They're kind of just writing shit on a whim, making up character shit that kind of comes out of nowhere. It makes no sense for the previously established track pattern. Now, granted, that's always kind of been a part of The Umbrella Academy and Netflix's standpoint, but just some things that I noticed just in general. And as far as kind of this season goes, versus obviously, again, they shot season 3 almost entirely in Europe, but they're back in Atlanta for this season. And so I'm just kind of wondering if we're going to see, you know, kind of any more COVID things going forward. And so, but kind of my last point that I want to bring up before we wrap up and get out of here is, so now that we're on the last season, again, we got the first 2 episodes, so we have 8 more. So now that we're almost at the end of their tenure, right, I kind of think it's going to be interesting in order to like kind of see what Donald Glover does next with his career, obviously, because again, it's been so weird. His career has been the subject of such fascination over the last couple of years, and yet it feels like he's almost been like kind of purposefully going away from like what people wanted. You know, again, he's openly joked about people wanting him as Miles Morales. You know, he's obviously been on the last couple of community live streams that they did during the pandemic, and now the rumor is that they are actually finally doing the long-awaited Community movie that supposedly he will be a part of. You know, so it's almost like Glover. The thing that I always admire about him as a personality is that he only ever does what he wants to do, which is a very, very tough thing to do in this day and age, just in general. And that's something that he's very clearly always been focused on and always wanting. But I feel like And this is another one of those things where I can't tell if it's just the public perception and the media portrayal of him, or if these are just some actual thoughts. But I feel like he's kind of just been like going out of his way to like kind of paint out like some kind of more like obvious statements where it's like purposefully trolling people, you know, which again, I'm always kind of 50-50 when it comes to like just people in Hollywood just trolling, you know, regular people, especially when they're trolling their own fans of the shit that they like, you know, and the people that are supportive of them, you know. Like I still think that like one of the most confusing things I read was when he tweeted out a thing about like somebody asked him if he about working with Zendaya, and I don't know if he was misquoted or not, but he said something along the lines of, yeah, I like Zendaya's work, but she should come over and work with the Chronic. And like I wasn't sure, because I'm like, wait, are you meant to like be comparing yourself to Dr. Dre and all that? And then he said that thing also when he was promoting season 3 back in the spring, where he's like, oh yeah, my show's literally the greatest show ever made. The only show that's better than my show is The Sopranos. That's the only thing. And I'm like, okay, like we can tell you're feeling yourself just a little bit here, you know. And my whole thing is, again, I try not to comment as much on like kind of celebrity status in their own regard towards their own art, and kind of, you know, at the end of the day, I always want the work to shine out more than the artist's own individual whatever thoughts, methods, and everything. Because that the point being is that should be reflected in the work and all that. So like, I don't know, like, do you think that like Glover's to a point now where it's like, you know, like kind of, you know, for lack of a better word, like the pressures of it are starting to get to him, or no, you think it's just like kind of media portrayal and bias?
I think it's media portrayal and bias. I'm gonna be honest. This might come off as weird, but I feel like in the Black community, they don't really look at like the fan reception or the media reception. They look at like the reception for their peers, you know, like how do their peers feel about them? And this kind of is funny because I saw a clip of like a recent Pharrell interview where he was talking about Donald Glover, and he was just like glowing on him, like gushing. Like he said, he's like one of the most amazing creators he's ever met. Like his music is fantastic. His show's creative. Like, I think that's what Donald Glover really works for, like the respect from his peers. And clearly he has it. So I think that's what really he strives for. He strives for like to make things that he knows that his peers will respect more so than really what his fans, because fans will eat anything. Anything Donald Glover's going to put out, it's going to be big. You know, he put out an album that wasn't even by Childish Gambino, but it was him. Like, I don't think his name was on it. And it did numbers, you know, like anything he does, it's going to work. So he's just going to do whatever he wants. And he's going to make whatever he wants because he knows that his peers, that's what he's looking for. You know, like, just the respect from Pharrell, like he's got to look up to Pharrell to some extent. So it's got to mean a lot to him, you know?
Right. Because remind me again, like how, like, because when did Pharrell break out? Like, did they break out like right around the same time, or was Pharrell a couple years earlier?
Well, it's been around since like the 90s, like early 2000s, 90s.
Oh, wow. Okay. Never mind that. Never mind that. Yeah. I again, like, I had no idea how long Pharrell has really been around for. Yeah. No, that's what I figured. Like I said, and again, it's just the fact of, again, the fact that he has achieved so much success in like such a short period of time. Like all of this only came about like in the last like 10 years, like really since like, again, because he really started to blow up like once he left Community in 2014. So that's kind of like more recently. So last thing I want to bring up before we wrap up and get out of here. So now that Donald Glover's pretty much about to be done with the show, what do you think is next for him? You know, what do you think it is that he's going to want to do next? You know, kind of ultimately, what was it that do you think that he will accomplish what it is that he wanted to say with this show?
Well, I don't think he's going into movies personally. I don't really see him as like a movie kind of guy. He's said multiple times that he's done making music as Childish Gambino. So maybe he would make it as like Donald Glover. But I don't think he's ever going to stop making music either. Like he did the Guava Island thing, and I think he had a soundtrack attached to that as well, or like him and Rihanna did some kind of music with it. And I never saw Guava Island. I don't really think it did that well, but I could see more like niche stuff like that. Like nothing that's going to have the same like relevance as Atlanta. Honestly, I don't think he's ever going to reach this height again. But I could see more music, more like behind the scenes stuff. Maybe having like his own production company to some extent. I don't know if he already does, but I could see a lot of that stuff. I don't think he's ever going to like strive to be as mainstream as his height has reached already, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that, especially considering that, like, again, I feel like, again, he is somebody who has always had his kind of thumb on the pop culture, you know, on the pop culture, you know, stratosphere in general, way better than a lot of other creatives do. And he, again, just kind of sees it's like, again, if I'm trying to go with the mainstream, it's, you know, it's going to just swallow me up and you know, chew me up and spit me out and just reject me as like a bunch of other people, you know. And I think he definitely, as far as the movies points go, you're right, because he definitely kind of does sense it again, just as far as like where the culture is at. Movies are just not where they used to be, you know. Obviously, again, I love movies, you love movies, but like, again, just people by at large just do not have the same kind of love and appreciation for movies as they previously did. So I think the point about having a production company, I think, is probably like the smartest thing. I could definitely see him, you know, you could definitely see, like, you know, from like whatever his production house studio would be, you know, that maybe him and his brother and the rest of the other people, because the only other thing really I feel like, because this was another project that I forgot about that was about to get off the ground a couple years ago, was that, again, right when season 2 of Atlanta was about to come out, there was the announcement that him and his brother were working on an animated Deadpool series, and I believe that Donald Glover was going to be working on that, and that ended up falling through completely. I'm assuming just because they didn't want any sort of conflict or confusion with the movies that were coming out at the time. So yeah, that definitely makes the most sense for sure.
But he released a script for that, didn't he?
What's that?
He released the script for that, didn't he? Like,
I think he did. I think he did. Yeah.
That just shows he doesn't really care. Like, he doesn't really care about this kind of stuff, I don't think.
Right, which is awesome. Like, I love that. Like that's one of the things that, again, just I respect the most. Is it's like he is solely about the work, and when it's not, he's again just lets it loose, and he understands that, like, he knows the people who he knows who the people are that he's trying to impress, if anyone, and the rest, it's like he just doesn't care, and he's just making what he wants, which is awesome. Again, at the end of the day, that's all that you can thrive for in Hollywood and working in these conditions. You know, we can like it, we can not like it, whatever, but at the end of the day, he's going to do what he wants to do, and I think that's a good point to end it. So before we wrap up and get out of here, what would you rate these first 2 episodes of this most recent season of Atlanta out of 5?
Out of 5, I'd say like a 4. Yeah, I like it better. I'd like it better than most of the other episodes from season 3 already. So
yeah, I agree with that.
Through line is already better.
Exactly. Well, in the sense that there actually is a through line versus, I feel like a lot of the biggest criticism that came from season 3 is the fact of, again, just without every other episode was a standalone episode. There really didn't seem to be any sort of a consistent through line, which for me is kind of what ruined a little bit of season 3. But again, it's got the consistent through line back. It's got kind of all the good Atlanta elements that we kind of like back. And yeah, so I'm going to give these 2 episodes a 4 out of 5 as well. Josh, it was great having you back on. It was an absolute blast. I hope I can get you on for more episodes in the future. Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
On Twitter at BaconPizza7. Anywhere else, you're just gonna have to find me. Sorry, guys.
At Jay Markland, I love it. I love whenever you promote yourself. And of course, follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Talkin TV, official Talkin TV podcast across all platforms as well. Subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitch if necessary. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next week for Don't Worry, Darling.